I think that just as we're living in a nuclear age, we have grown so tremendously in scientific knowledge. It doesn't seem too much to say that men can begin to awaken to the fact that they haven't grown enough spiritually and haven't recognized their spiritual capacities.
Once something like eating is death, then you've struck at the very heart of life. The enemy of the older radical theories may have been the ruling class, but today the stakes of whether we will reform ourselves into a new kind of human being, a new kind of society, whether we will find selves worth being, the stakes of it are simply life itself.
Modernity has created promises that it has no ability to keep. What this means is that we're a society of disembedded individuals, stuck in the impossible situation of being alone together. And what was understood as emancipation has proved to be a form of isolation. It is important to understand that what I am telling you is not simply a cultural history. It's a description of the story that shapes every single person that you know. This is why there is a rise in mental illness. It's absolutely concurrent with the disembedding of the individual, because individuals can't constitute themselves by the very nature of the case. Subjectivity cannot sustain its own weight. We need others to tell us. But we've been given an ethical mandate by the Enlightenment that tells us that that's immoral, that nobody should constrain us.
But before we get started, I just wanted to mention that we have a couple of classes coming up and a lecture. We have the Sermon on the Mount Over the Centuries from the Early Church to Christian Anarchism, which is a class by Caleb Owens, who's currently a graduate student at Boston University studying theology. And it's going to be in August, so August 12th, 19th, 26th, and September 2nd. And all of those are going to be on Zoom. And as always, people can join us on Patreon at whatever level they are comfortable with. Check them out. Make sure that you get at least the worker scholar level to have access to the recordings. And then also right around the corner on August 15th, we have a special lecture in the TMA lecture series, Elites and Democracy, a guest lecture by Hugo Drocon. And this is based on his book by the same name, Elites and Democracy. So he's going to come and explain this, his central arguments to us. And he says in the description, a paradox of democracies is that they are always ruled by elites. What can democracy mean in this context? So for those of you who are troubled by that question, which probably we all should be, this would be a good one to join. All patrons at the Salt of the Earth tier or above will receive access to that live lecture. And again, you would join us on Patreon. And finally, I wanted to mention, which kind of hopefully will get us into our discussion a bit, because I'm anticipating this. Deacon Chris May and I will be teaching a class in October. It's a 4-part class that is entitled What's Human About Intelligence, the Ethics of AI. And we'll partly be discussing the latest papal encyclical by Pope Leo, which covered social teaching as well as artificial intelligence and automation generally. And I know we'll talk about that today as well. But also we may get off into some other, responses to AI and the whole issue of ethics, because the tech community has actually spent quite a bit of time, believe it or not, developing ethical frameworks as well. So at any rate, that's coming up right around the corner in October, starting on October 12th and going for 4 consecutive Mondays. So for any of these, just check out our Patreon. If you want further descriptions, you can go to pmorin.org, our website. Okay, so that was a mouthful. So I'm done with that. And I guess our initial plan was to at least start out with what views we have, kind of initial views, I guess. I know you've read the papal encyclical, so have I, right? Have you?
I don't have time to be reading something like that.
Okay, well, I have because I'm going to be teaching it. So, but you've probably read about it, right?
I don't have time to be reading about. Here's what I want to know. I made a prediction in a Grange a few months ago that basically very little new would be said, and that basically a
Yeah, I
wishy-washy.
do remember that.
So you remember what I said? Was I right?
I do. Not entirely,
Okay.
but yeah, like you could anticipate, let's put it this way, knowing Pope Leo and his preferences already, I could have anticipated most of what he said. But has it all been said before? Probably not all of it. It's called Magnifica Humanitas. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's it actually covers like pretty much all of Catholic social teaching kind of condensed in the first third or so, which is really useful. That definitely doesn't cover new territory, but it's very useful as a review or for somebody that doesn't know it. And it's also necessary because it's the teaching that he bases his response to technology on. And then as he's dealing with technology and AI, out of necessity, because AI is completely, well, not completely new, but it's certainly new to most people, and it's very, very palpable and experienced by everybody now. It's the first time, obviously, that a pope has addressed artificial intelligence, and there are some unique aspects to it potentially. But that being said, if you know Catholic social teaching well, and you have a passing familiarity with Pope Leo, you would probably be able to anticipate most of what he says. I don't know. What does that?
So what did I specifically not anticipate?
Well, so he does get into some of these issues with personification or developing emotional relationships, or giving whether we ought to give AI any level of moral responsibility separable from human responsibility. In other words, does it have consciousness at all? Is it something that we should look at merely through, this is a tool, we're using it badly, or we could use it better? The interesting thing is, especially in the second read, I don't think he absolutely said simply, this is a tool. There's nothing particularly special about it. It's just our characters and how we use it. And that's been my position, honestly. I think Leo says something a little bit more ambiguous in that particular question. And I'm not sure what I think about that, but I'm really loath to like separate AI agency, so to speak, in any way from human agency, because I truly believe it is simply made by humans. And he's not going into King's North territory where he's like, this is from Satan or something like that. Not at all. But some of the things that he says shy away from clearly stating this is a tool, it's sort of value neutral. He says it's not value neutral. And in other words, it has, this is where I might have to read it a third or fourth time because I'm not sure exactly what he means, but he says it's not value neutral. It's not just a tool. As though he might be saying the medium is the message. But then in other places, he sort of says, but it could be used for many good things, which you predicted. It could be used for many good things. It could be used for many bad things. We need to avoid the bad things. But I mean, to answer your question, there is this ambiguity that I was surprised to find there, and I don't know exactly what to make of it.
Well, and this is why all of these attempts to address these messages to Catholics in general, in particular, and all people of goodwill, where they functionally fall flat, is people are given such an ambiguous message that there's kind of nothing to do with it if you really wanted to do something with it.
Well, beyond the obvious, right? Like, which is that we should follow his advice and not use it to make weapons, but of course we will. And we shouldn't use it to spy on people, but of course we will. We shouldn't, use it to hoard data, but of course we will. So like,
Which
putting...
we really need somebody to tell us that anyway. Again, we're back at who is we.
Right. Well, I mean, I get, so to be charitable, like the reason why we need him to tell us that is because people respect him more than they respect some other people in the world. So I think he's trying to like use his moral influence to tell people what they already really know. But like, he's lending his voice to like basically common sense, ethical reasoning about AI.
Sure. Which, fair enough. Perhaps that is his cross to bear, is to put out encyclicals like this that inherently fall flat because there's no subject or agent at work in the world to really run with these arguments in the first place. So,
yeah, I mean, that is his job, or part of his job, right? Now, could he have, like, I don't know, been more specific? Probably. But he has done, so I haven't read too much about this, but a little. One thing he did do is he invited people from the tech space to meet with him, I believe, before and after he wrote this. And one of them was the CEO of Anthropic, who actually wants ethical guidelines and legal guidelines. And I think a lot of these people are not opposed to them. In fact, the only way to create kind of an even playing field would be if governments and corporations adopted some sort of uniform standard. So anyway, I will say he didn't just sit there and pontificate. He actually, and you, in reading it, you get the sense that maybe it's just because he's got such a facility with the English language because he's a native English speaker, but you get the sense that this is actually reasoned out by him, or like he actually, in conjunction with these conversations, gave it serious thought. It doesn't read like some of them read more like a committee document, if that makes sense.
Sure. Right. I mean, back in the day, George Weigel had a critique of one of Benedict XVI's encyclicals, basically about how you could tell which one was written by the left liberal inflected, Committee of Life and Justice or whatever, and then which ones were actually written by the Pope, and you could go through and basically, and for him, he wanted to say the good parts were the conservative parts from Benedict, and then the bad parts were from the wokesters in the Curia or whatever.
Right. And I'm sure that happens, although, it goes out under that Pope's name. So we got to presume that, he assents to it all, right? So it all represents his ideas. But yeah, you can tell it happens. You can totally tell. And I didn't feel like Leo relied as much on that process. It seems to actually have come from him, which is cool. But yeah, most of it is stuff that I would recommend, you would recommend, everybody would recommend, of goodwill would recommend. And yeah, and he's taken these extra steps now. There is a possibility that the governments of the world will kind of get wise to the fact that they have to control this to a certain extent or regulate it, right? And then they might be looking around for different frameworks. This could help form that. And there are other major sources of ethical reasoning about AI that could also be put into that mix. So I think it serves as a legitimizer of the fact that there's a problem and that we need to come up with a solution, that we can't just we will, but we shouldn't blithely move on and just let it happen. But I mean, I have no doubt that's what we're going to do, but I'm a pessimist.
I've been targeted with reels on Instagram of people basically ruminating that if you're a Catholic, you can now oppose the imposition of anything AI in your workplace on the grounds of religious liberty. And that
Hmm.
I don't know how true this is. Maybe this will be a court case one day.
I
That,
got that from a friend. Yeah,
that
I've heard
basically
that
you
too.
could try and enforce some sort of late Ludditism and then, yeah, threaten a lawsuit, I guess.
Because of the papal teaching, right? Like, because you can say that papal teaching represents my religion, my religious faith, and you have a document, right? And then, but I would think, based on having read it, like, I think you would have to make the argument that the use of AI, the way it's being used, is incorrect, which surely most people could do because it is being used badly. Like, it's being used to eliminate jobs and to, um, automate things that people should still do and so forth. So I don't think it would be hard, but you would have to make some sort of argument because the Pope's not fully objecting to AI 100%.
Sure. Nor is the Catholic faith really about objecting to AI or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a core tenet of moral theology.
Yeah, but that don't stop people from suing about it,
Right.
right? Like, that's for sure.
Sure.
And I think that's a good development.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I normally don't like advocate lawsuits, but in this case, like, we need to slow down a little bit. And so I don't know. I would find that refreshing if Catholics decided to sue on religious grounds. I'm not going to do it, but it's interesting because it certainly gets used badly all the time. So like, what is your, like, putting all the, papal teachings and all that kind of aside, like, what is your personal feeling about artificial intelligence, just as you as a person now, and whether you use it or not?
I mean, I mostly don't use it because I mostly don't work on the computer. So I have not yet begun really integrating it into aspects of my life. I've mainly noticed it now when I Google things, I get AI pre-digesting things for me, which honestly is pretty cool.
Mm,
If I just want a simple, stupid answer for something,
right.
having more computational power digest it for me. Marginal for me, it's a marginal, I'm sure you could say it's taking up a certain amount of water or energy use or whatever. But when most of that investment is being made up front, it's hard for me to not feel like it's a marginal increase in the quality of my life, and or I just get more productive on a treadmill. And that's where I don't have too much heartburn about my moral complicity in it, that the general will of society is making this happen. And therefore, me going with the flow in this instance is allowing me to go against the grain a bit more, I think. Which obviously is a wishy-washy and uninspiring answer if the point were to stop it, and I've just accepted I can't stop it because there's too much weight behind this, and there's not a critical mass of comrades to meaningfully oppose this at this late date.
Right. Yeah. We'll maybe talk about data centers in a little bit, but I wanted to. So, one of the things that's kind of given me some heartburn about those AI summaries is I use them too, for sure. Every time I do, though, there's this little bit of like guilt that I feel because I'm not actually going to the people's website that the AI is tapping into. And we ourselves have a website. And now, if you Google Morin, um, that AI summary more often than not includes something about the Morin Academy because the website's got tons of material on it, which is both good and bad. But like, do you ever click on the links that the AI summary gives you?
Yes.
Okay.
If I care enough, yes.
Good. Yeah. See, I think that's key, mainly because I've made many websites over the years. I still have some websites out there. The Morin Academy website is really good. And the one thing I can see happening is a lot of people just not even looking any further, and then all that work won't get like recognized or really looked at carefully.
Sure. Obviously, totally. 80% of people are going to have their minds melted by this stuff.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's partly a intellectual property problem from my perspective. I had all of my academic books used by Anthropic. I'm part of their big lawsuit. The lawsuit, I'll get a few $1,000s. But the intellectual property theft is just overwhelming. There's no solution now. I mean, every website, publicly available website in the world is completely searchable, crawlable. It'll find stuff that's not even visible to the public. And yeah,
Sure.
anything that is published is going to be crawled by AI and used. And so there is no more intellectual property as far as I can tell.
I'm in my adulting era. Capital is more revolutionary than us. The need to accumulate capital will always, in the long run, triumph over your bourgeois rights.
That's true.
These are the rules.
But you know what? The tech bros, some of them, not
Some of them will ideologically object.
No, that's not what I was going to say. You anticipated incorrectly. Some of them anticipate this leading to communism.
Some of them do.
Yes,
They are
because
ideologically deranged, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, they are definitely going against the grain at the moment, but once you get rid of intellectual property rights, the more that erodes, that's partly what capitalism is based on. Who's going to invent anything if it's pretty much discoverable by anybody in the world and can be used free for all like that? I mean, you have no profit. Pretty soon it's going to be hard to have a profit incentive. And so to that extent, I can kind of see their point. They're looking forward to it. I'm not sure I'm looking forward to it. I don't like what we have now, but I'm not sure I want that either. But yeah, some of them are anticipating the need for socialism or communism because between that and the fact that AI will be doing so much of the work, leaving a lot of people unemployed, right? Something has to change.
But this is the uncertainty that we don't know how much all of this is going to change or how it's going to shake out or how a new deal with the current nation states arrangements will be rearranged.
Right.
So that will be the exoteric political drama of the coming decades. Case in point, the AI can canvas all of the Morin Academy's intellectual property, if you will. Well, it never made financial sense for us anyway. And so more and more of the PMC or the commentariat or whatever are going to be proletarianized. They're going to be pushed into a position basically like we are with the Morin. None of this is a good business decision.
Yeah, definitely not. We're a nonprofit, but even nonprofits have to have enough money to continue to run. And it's not clear from the outside. Make it clear, we're kind of on the edge. We're always, yeah.
But again, that's just the austerity inherent in adulting. Is that the data center build out will happen. We don't know how many jobs it will replace. We don't know what kind of new jobs will have to basically be built to manage the machines and the AI.
Jeez,
And the unfortunate thing is the results. It will probably take, who knows if this will lead to what kind of market crashes and wars will happen to renegotiate the ledgers. But at the end of it, more or less mundane life will probably continue.
It'll change the economy. It is, exactly what direction it'll go is uncertain, but it's going to have a fairly profound effect on the economy. It's like
I'm not saying
it's
it
like
won't. I'm saying, will the drudgery of mundane existence basically carry on in a mutated form?
so like the idealistic tech bros say no, because they say that with all this extra time, we're finally going to be able to get around to like living our best lives, right? I don't buy it. I'm not saying that,
That's
but
what they
like
were saying in the 70s and 80s and 90s too.
that's exactly what they were saying. And they were proven wrong. And yet the same type of people, and sometimes the same exact people, are coming back around again. Like, I guess Bill Gates basically said that. He's like, recently to Fareed Zakaria, he was like, I don't understand why everybody's so pessimistic about this. Well, guess what? Look what happened to the internet. And back when he was in his garage making this stuff up, I think he just did the computer, not the internet. But like, you know, he was sure that this was going to make life so much better.
And you know what? For him, it did.
Yeah, for him it did. I think,
And
yeah,
for all of us, it kind of did in a way. On one level, it did. On another level,
definitely. But it allowed the capitalism to, I mean, just really metastasize, right? Like a lot of them thought, oh, this is going to be when we start sharing everything and there'll be no more intellectual property. We'll just, everything will be, and the opposite happened. So maybe that will happen again somehow. I can't imagine how, but then I guess that's the thing. You can't really anticipate what people will do with this, but they'll find a way to profit and continue to run this economy, probably. Well, I mean, so I'm a subscriber to ChatGPT, so I pay them $20 a month. Why do I do that? Because in my job, I have a lot of just really kind of mundane data collecting or like making a spreadsheet or just things like that usually would take up hours of my time. And it'll do those things, right? It'd be better if I could get somebody else and hire them, but I can't hire everybody to do everything. So like some of these things I have to do myself, and some of them.
And they're going to cost a lot more than $20 a month.
Well, if I could even find somebody to do it and then supervise them. And then the other thing I use it for is bouncing ideas off of it. So I refrain from using it to just write stuff unless it's really mundane stuff that you could just find anywhere, right? Like make me a list. I've had it make me a list of like authors that wrote on this, or that. But what it is somewhat useful for is, here's my outline or here's my idea. What do you think of this? And then basically the conversation just stimulates ideas. So there's a way of using it, I think, that doesn't involve you in basically using AI to think for you. And it would be thinking with it. It's another interlocutor. It's not even the best. I think you're the best, or maybe Jacob and you tied for like the best. But like it's anybody that actually understands what you're saying and you can bounce ideas off of helps stimulate your thinking. And so sometimes I use it that way. And I would say that it's useful in that regard. So I don't know, does that cross a line?
I don't think for me. Another way to say it is the people that use it like that, 20% of those people are going to get smarter and more productive because they're able to have the AI do a lot of the basic intellectual work from scratch, and then they get to do the higher level functions sorting through that data that's already been figured out.
Right.
So 10% of people's lives are going to get more productive, and then 80% of people are going to have less to do, or they're not going to use it for stuff like that, and then they're going to fall behind.
Yeah, you have to it's tempting, right? As soon as you find out AI could write that paper for you, this especially is the, problem with students now. AI can write that paper for you. It's so tempting to go ahead and let AI write that paper for you. But then the problem is you become one of the 95% who can't run anything, right? Like who can't make decisions. Ultimately, as I like to remind my students, people who think well are, and I'm not saying they're good people, but people who think well are people who make decisions about other people's lives. And so,
right, but we're adulting. 80% of us are going to get screwed. So then we're talking about the 20% of us where it's not this kind of rudimentary question. It's have it write the rough draft of your new book, and then that becomes the base. And obviously there's something inherently problematic about that way, that rough draft or that skeleton is going to be a constant temptation to overly structure your argument in accordance with that kind of predetermined path. Obviously that's a fraught thing, but it saves you a lot of time and energy.
It does.
And then it doesn't necessarily inherently overdetermine the finished product if your mind can win the whom.
Right. But you have to really do that consistently and not give into that temptation. So that's not.
And that's why it's going to be a minority of people that can use it that way, and the majority of people will be dominated by the machinery.
Right. And one thing that's going to happen is you're going to get this, the expectation for slickness and smoothness is going to continually rise, right? Like it will take the shittiest manuscript and turn it into a polished, presentation, but it's going to read like every other GPT or whatever you're using, Claude or whatever, that book or article that you ever did read, right? You're gonna know it, or at least I can tell, but I think people are gonna get used to that. Everything's gonna have to be like perfect. At the same time, they're not gonna know how to make it perfect themselves, but they're gonna have the expectation of it being like that. So the realness, is that a term we use anymore? The 90s realness or whatever. The realness, like, just dies, right? Like being real matters less in a world like that. In fact, it could just be a real detriment. That's a sad thought that I have about this.
Sure. But this is in germ, this is nothing different than our, a frustration that we're pretty sure the information we're putting out with the Morin is good, substantial information. Meanwhile, 95% of people do not want that kind of thing. And they might say it's because the production values aren't where they want it to be. But at the end of the day, they don't want the core of what we're selling.
Right. Yeah. And probably both. I think it is, people are getting used to these production values, and we're not willing to invest the time in that. I mean, when somebody goes into a university classroom, production values are not really all that important. And sometimes the higher the production values, the less substance is in the person doing the talking. So there's almost an inverse relationship, but you're getting a real person who's, interacting with you, sees where you need to go, sees what you're missing, and that kind of thing. So I think there's that. And what was your other point? Because there were two of them, the slickness factor, but you said that wasn't as important as
the substance and whether people can't see the substance or want it.
Just their inability to deal with the substance. Yeah. Which is only going to get worse because everything's going to be so instantly, like the solution to their problems, at least superficially, is going to be fairly instantly available. Now, what they can do about that to make that a reality, that's not so instantly available. And that's where they'll be relying on people who can still do the thinking. The problem is those people are going to be elites who might not have their best interests at heart. I realize this is going to happen, but because intellectual laziness is real. But like, what they don't realize is, I mean, we're well underway of developing a true like oligarchy, and or I don't know, it's a warped aristocracy. It's an aristocracy oligarchy. Intelligence does matter in this economy a great deal. Somebody's intelligence, whether it's
Right.
direct
As long
or
as
the
it's
intelligence.
integrated into the social hierarchy, that can be leveraged.
Right, right. It's such, I mean, we don't really have a democracy as it is. It's such a threat to the very last vestiges of popular rule, like not that I'm, an advocate for like redemocratizing or whatever, but I don't think people realize that. They're gonna be fed more bread and circuses, during election times, and they're gonna feel like they may be having some sort of impact. But people who like don't have the judgment to discern bullshit from facts, they aren't going to make good decisions. So it's going to be easy to, it's already easy to fool people. It's just going to get easier, is what I'm saying.
The blind lead the blind, and the dead will bury the dead.
Yeah.
And adulting will be making your compromises in this shifting system so that you can at least survive, if not thrive.
So that's kind of been your philosophy for a while now. You're just kind of accepting what's happening, whether it's climate change or this, and you're more or less like trying to figure out how to adapt and live a good, morally or spiritually good life in this situation. Is that out to boil it down?
I think so. I mean, what's the alternative? Like, not accept it and go insane?
Yeah. I mean,
I think looking back on it, I think it wasn't just your book, but it was around the time that you published The Gap in God's Country that I think that was a watershed moment, at least for me, and kind of at least for me intellectually, because it was focusing in on that gap example. And partly it was to the extent that your book was directed at, I guess, who would you say the target market of that book was, target audience?
Yeah, it was the only book that I ever wrote targeting Christians.
Okay.
So that's who I would say.
You were hoping pastors.
Ministers. Yeah, ministers. Mm-hmm. Pastors, priests, ministers. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then as far as we know, in terms of reaching that audience, it was, I guess, a flop. That'd be fair to say. I'm not trying to be.
Yeah. Well, I don't know for sure how many of them like bought it or read it. There's no evidence that the pastors closest to me or my family read it. So, I mean, we talk about this a lot, like the people who are in your life, whether it's like my local pastor or the Church of Word of Life that I somewhat attend, or St. Isidore's or St. Thomas More, or any church around here that I attend, engage that work at all. I did have some evangelical pastors who are podcasters, like 2 or 3, who reached out and interviewed me and liked the book. So, but they happen to be like evangelical, like, what do you call them? Ex-evangelical types who were also environmentally aware. And that's a really rare combination. I mean, most departing evangelicals or evangelicals that are kind of coming back to the church a bit, that's mainly enough for them. They don't have a lot of bandwidth to deal with the issues of the environment and agriculture and things like that. So I think, I mean, if I'd have written another book out of like 200 that just dealt with the evangelical struggle against like right-wing, whatever, nationalism. It would have gotten read by more people and more pastors, but the fact that it had environmental and agricultural and economic and psychological, all these things that I was trying to put together, they were not interested, I think, for the most part. And that's too bad, but I'm not sorry I wrote it. I'm not sure I would write another book, though, based on that experience. I may have written my last book.
Right. And then also remind me, because it's been a while since I thought about this, and maybe it's being painted by one of those last podcasts where he kept accusing you, the pastor kept accusing you of being a Marxist. And even after you corrected him, he ended it. So maybe I'm backfilling one of the worst interviews and kind of painting all the interviews that way. But I feel like my sense reading these interviews was that the people, even this small group of pastors who are reading this, they weren't doing a great job of really digesting the argument.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would say about that particular interview that he did not accuse me in the sense that, he was actually saying, you're a Marxist and I don't like that, or, you're a threat to democracy, or not like that. He was he's trying to categorize me.
Right. He was trying to be objective. It wasn't a term of abuse.
Right. Yeah. And he would be incorrect about that. But the very fact that I used Marx among many other thinkers in my analysis is enough for a lot of people to label a person a Marxist. It's like, it's like some sort of taboo, or it colors everything else a person sees. And I think that he thought, anybody who would do that, maybe anybody who would be critical of neoliberal capitalism, obviously is a Marxist. And I think I tried to explain why I was not, there's quite a bit of else going on in this book. Marxists wouldn't like Catholic Christianity, for one thing, also just Christopher Lasch and conservatism, psychology, all that stuff Marxists wouldn't particularly like. But a person who doesn't know what Marxism is past a critique of capitalism doesn't even know that there's a conflict there. So, but I mean, to get to your point, yeah, the reason why that's probably my last book is because I feel like you can't communicate with people in that format. You can maybe communicate with some people individually or in small groups, maybe, if they're there for the right reason. Yeah.
Right. And then it's at best with the small group of people who we suspect substantially didn't get it, or yeah, I mean, we went back and forth, to me, if we were to, and I don't want to get into if we've gone back and forth about the respective labels we would apply to ourselves or to each other. But to me, that was a book written by a neoconservative or a post-neoconservative or neo-neoconservative, which I guess you could say, well, there's a common genealogy with Marxism and neoconservatism. And but that's not what that dude meant. And to me, it's just the gap between how I read the book versus the gap of how he was reading the book, the gap between what you wanted to accomplish versus how the paltry reception that it received.
Yeah.
So I've been living in this post Gap in God's Country situation where I've become hyper aware of how everything that I thought I could do, or that we being people in civil society or in America or whatever, the gaps are way more massive than I had thought. In that Smage book, I guess there's this old Irish joke about that, you're on your way to Dublin and you ask a farmer on the road for directions. And the farmer says, well, if you want to get to Dublin, I wouldn't start from here. I guess it's an old joke. And the issue is, if we wanted to get to a better world, we shouldn't be starting from here. And the gap between, to me, this is an obvious dire reality. And then for other people, they have not yet realized we shouldn't be starting from here. And then
Right.
if they don't even realize we shouldn't be starting from here, we definitely ain't getting to Dublin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of our situation. And I think a lot of people just, yeah, they don't realize how dire the situation is, so they can engage in more wishful thinking or sort of like idealist rationalism, and I see this all the time. Like you've mentioned the 5 stages of grief before, but like arguing and debating is definitely one of them. And, trying to come up with an alternative narrative and getting angry and just not wanting to hear it, denial, stuff, all that comes out. And by the way, yeah, I mean, like I would be closer to I think I call myself a classical conservative in that book, but a certain type of neoconservative comes close to a classical conservative. And I sooner describe myself as that, which is very hard for people to understand, than a Marxist, right? Even though there are certain aspects of Marx's analysis that are just good. So therefore, you're going to use them, right? I'm not going to discriminate, but like I wouldn't label myself a Marxist. Christian and some sort of conservative would be closer. But man, you try to explain that to people, and
The gap is too big. We can't get from here to there.
Right.
And when that's the case, this is why, you're still a recurring argument as when I accuse you of being a clericalist, you want to get these types of people to get it and somehow or other elevate the consciousness of their congregations. And I'm like, one, you're not going to get these pastors to get it. And then two, even if they did get it, they're not going to get the laity to get it.
Yeah, I guess I'm fantasizing about a pope that just like completely orders them exactly what to do, which is not going to happen.
And even if the pope did, it wouldn't matter.
They wouldn't do it, right? Or they wouldn't understand it. Is that more the case in your mind?
Even if they did, they won't understand it. Even if they did understand it, even if the spirit was willing, the flesh is weak.
Right. And Vatican's a long ways away from most places.
Yeah.
Now, if he could send his troops in,
in all ways, the Vatican is, again, like if let's say for the sake of the argument that the Pope is based in whatever in the Curia, for the sake of the argument, it sounds like, I haven't read it, I haven't read people writing about it, Magnificus Humanitas is not, as formulated, is not how you start a crusade against AI or whatever you might want, arousing of civil society towards the reign of Christ the King. You wouldn't write a document like that.
No, yeah, that's right. A good point. Yeah, say Laudato Si would be the same way. And
I love them, sure.
Yeah, and not just the encyclical.
Of why traditionalists don't like post-conciliar, especially encyclicals, is because on a certain level they are these kind of milquetoast, irenic, extended meditations and kind of seminar talks that don't reach what the average person needs, or even the average elite who would potentially run with these ideas.
So, like in the Laudato Si case, the church, put together an organization, right, called Laudato Si, which does certain things, right? And my experience with them is they don't ever do anything of substance. I'm sorry, but like you can't really engage them because there's no there. I'm sorry, but yeah. So like,
well, the Vatican is a bureaucracy as a whole is about as hollow as everything else.
Yeah. So like I guess where I was going with that is obviously that's not what you mean by doing something more than just writing an encyclical. That's just doubling down on like whatever that is. But what would it look like from your perspective if the church did it differently?
Well, one, I mean, just to be fair, the gap is too big. Like there's nothing really, there's a famous story about Benedict XVI telling somebody maybe it was Peter Saywald, his biographer, but he told somebody, somebody was asking him, like, why don't you get the curia in shape? Why don't you do this? And supposedly he pointed to the door and said, that's where my authority ends. So,
Ooh.
so when the Pope, and I think that's a pretty omnipresent, I think most powerful people, if you really talk to them, they feel basically as impotent as the average person. If they still have the consciousness or conscience to feel that something is fundamentally wrong, I think the dark truth is that no matter how far up the ladder you climb, everybody feels impotent and alienated.
Right.
If they aren't psychos.
And yet the Pope has got to have the hope, right, that that something good will come of what he and the church does. It's kind of necessary, right, aspect of his mentality.
Presumably.
Yeah.
I think there's two separate issues when we're talking about these theological things. You darkest before dawn, and God can bring good out of evil or out of nothingness. We can hold on to these things, but it does not follow that we can think that in our own lives, in some sort of straightforward, unalienated, unproblematic way, that we get to participate in these higher level theological and historical healings or progressions.
Okay. So,
or I guess to clarify, we can participate in them. In fact, we probably have to participate in them, but it will not feel good. It will not feel like in a straightforward way we're just being the change we can believe in. It will feel mostly like a crucifixion. And if it doesn't, it's probably more of a sign of our sanctity than how it would feel for most fallen people to be living through this reality.
okay, that makes more sense because yeah, that makes total sense. I was going to say, so Brian Zahn just came out with a Substack post 2 days ago called Change the World, ? Our task is far more modest. And in this post, he of course says the church does charity, the church does its thing like that, but he uses Stanley Hauerwas among other people. I'm pretty sure Stanley Hauerwas actually wanted quite a bit more. But anyway, in this post, he kind of holds a position that a lot of Christian pastors hold, that, faith in Christ is mainly what it's about. And it's sort of leaving it up to God is where it's at, right? So like, I think that he's protesting against, obviously he's protesting against Christian nationalism, but I feel like he ran the risk of becoming passive. There's another term for this that I'm blanking out on right now.
Like quietism.
Quietism. He's kind of edging up on quietism. Because he's so kind of like put off by Christian nationalism, which is using the government, right, to like do these things, which I totally agree. Like, primarily Christians should not use politics and the government to get things done. I think you and I differ a little bit on that, ideally, but like in the current context, probably not that much. But, there's a lot of other ways one can act. And like you said, you can do it regardless of whether you see any payoff for it. And that is part of the deal, right? Like that is the cross in a way, that you do those things even if it hurts, so to speak, because this is what it means to be a Christian. Anyway, you haven't seen this post, but it reminds me of a position you're apparently not taking. I thought you were kind of heading down that path. I mean, I think if you just say no action is necessary because I give up, because, we're all effed basically. So like, it's not what you do, right? It's not what I do. But I guess I'm saying all this to kind of make it clear. Say more about your position, but I think you're articulating it better
better than.
better than you did before, right? Like, in other words, sometimes when you talk about this, you come off, I think, to like the external world maybe as we just can't do anything. And that's not exactly what you're saying, right?
No, I'm saying we as individuals have an ineradicable responsibility to do something. The issue is because we don't live in a society and because we don't generally, I mean, I don't have like a vibrant parish life, then what that means is everything that you can quote unquote do is going to be this petty, low impact process because it cannot be linked up with other people and you can't build a critical mass of activity. And
Right.
therefore, everything you do will be like largely pathetic. And you can square this as, this is part of like the little way, Saint Therese, or, there's all sorts of sort of spiritual traditions that can allow you to square you doing your small activities with it being a participation in salvation history. But that's something different than thinking you can create anything even on the scale of like a Kiwanis club, Kiwanis or Rotary or whatever, that even accomplishing that is like a massive feat if you're an individual or if you're a family.
Yeah, becoming less and less desirable and possible for most people. Most of those social service clubs are in steep decline because
Right.
people won't spend an hour together once a week.
Correct. And those are pretty low ask. And I'm just using that as an example. I mean, one way I've been thinking about this, again, this has been sort of the post gap shift. When did that come out? Was that 24?
It was the very end of 24 going into 25. So yeah, I'm pretty sure about that.
24 going into 25. And then what's good there too is it pairs like, okay, the second Trump administration, it's like we've functionally as a country, we're like, let's do it again,
Yeah.
So one of the ways I've been looking at this post gap and where I have, at least at a superficial level, become more cynical or pessimistic, I would say I've just deepened my realism, but the listener can decide for themselves. It's like, I think when the average American thinks about sort of politics or the world, and when we talk about localism, we tend to think that localism is our city or our state, as opposed to the national and international level. And where the aperture of my ambition has contracted radically is I think that is a mistake. That if we grant these terms of like there's a micro, if the microcosm is me, my soul, maybe your family, at most your family is the micro level, and then the meso level, which we tend to associate with localism, we actually shouldn't even think, in my case, Kansas City, I shouldn't think the local level is 1 million people. I should think the local level is literally just the people out of that million that I can talk to and at least theoretically have any kind of influence or impact on, or vice versa, that can directly impact me as another person consciously.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
But then if you make that shift, this is where I think the implications are unpleasant. Then you're admitting that the mayor is as alien to you as the president, or as the head of any other foreign country. You're basically admitting that even at your local level, like I've been to events where the mayor is, but like I don't know the mayor. Like the mayor doesn't give a shit about anything I think about,
Oh, yeah.
But we tend to think the mayor is on my side somehow or other. And I think that is, to me, that's where I thought that pre the gap, and now post gap, I'm just more aware that there are sort of the abyss between me and being able to make some like universal change or a national level change is way higher. When I'm like, no, actually, even the people I can literally talk to, I can't actually be seen or heard. They probably feel the same about me.
Maybe, although you probably would give them a hearing if they ever came to you. If the mayor came to your door, would you give them a hearing? Or maybe
I would
not.
listen. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I would too, but they're never going to do that. One of the things that a lot of people don't.
If they did, it wouldn't matter.
Right. A lot of people don't really know their local government at all, right? They pay little attention to it because they're so mesmerized on the national level because of CNN and channels like that. But what they don't realize is that unless you come from a tiny village, your local government is in the pockets of contractors and rich people in town. Totally. 100%. I've never lived in a government that wasn't like that. It's not representing you.
And also, I mean, it's that at a conscious level, but also, again, I've never met the mayor, so there's a sense in which who am I to say what he thinks? But surely he also knows that Kansas City is basically dominated by these national level trends and these international level things.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have that understanding that Kansas City is integrated into the higher level imperial and international circuits of what remains of the rules-based order and global capital and the AI buildouts and whatever. And therefore I might vote for the mayor. The mayor may say he cares about my interests, but at the end of the day, he does not. He cannot.
No.
And not only can he not, I cannot have any real commerce with the mayor. Or, I always say, like, quit thinking about the Pope, think about your bishop. And also, isn't it great that your bishop isn't really thinking about you anyway and just wants you to be a mediocre American? I don't have pull with my bishop. I barely have any pull, maybe if it ever came to it, with the parish priest. So given this, then what my field of activity is, or the scope of my activity, is not about bridging the gap in God's country. It's just keeping a Catholic worker farm on a partial neighborhood scale running and being ready for being constantly confronted by the fact that this does not make good financial sense. It makes dubious social sense. And most people cannot relate to it because it seems like I'm being bad with money. And I'm probably fueled by pride because why else would I do such a thing?
Well,
I always think they say Petrarch, the Renaissance poet, was the first person to climb to the top of a mountain to enjoy the view. And supposedly he ran into a peasant who was asking him what he's doing and where he's going. And supposedly the peasant thought he was possessed by a demon to want to climb. And
I figured that.
So I think there's a sense in which that's part of the gaps, is at the end of the day, the discussion we're having is so, and it intersects with the discussion we'll have in the Grange about Apostolic Majesty's interview about intrusibility. We're talking about escaping from the present and from modernity, at least at the level of intellectuality. And it is therefore the gap between being able to do that. Most people cannot or will not go there.
Right. Yeah. And I think that your realism there is good, because I think a lot of, and yeah, I know we need to get to the Grange, but like, I think that a lot of people who kind of decide I can't really affect the larger scheme of things right now in particular, will then go into this really romantic space where, like the Theo of Golden space. I read that book. Where, like, or Momo, where like just sitting there listening to somebody is going to change the world, that your very presence and your ability to listen is going to change people one person at a time, or that somehow the fact that you have touched a few people is going to have a butterfly effect and, everybody will be transformed. Those, things are very important. However, one of the things that I'm sure you've noticed, I've certainly noticed, is that when you listen to people under these circumstances, you are often providing a therapy service for them rather than having an actual contact with them, right? So for listening or presence in and of themselves in a world where people are kind of blind, deaf, and dumb to other people, or to like the the like both the promise and the obstacles in the way of actual love and things like that, you can't necessarily make contact. So a lot of times, if the more that you listen, the more you simply get used. So you have to be like selective as to who you listen to, or you become a service provider for them, followed by crickets as far as like they're actually being there for you, if that makes sense. So I think the fact that it's bleak, obviously, that, to see the world this way, but I think it's very realistic, and it's better to like actually know the truth. I firmly believe it's not good to like dwell in fantasy land. And when you do like make contact with other individuals in your local, like whatever environment, you know it. The false kind and the real kind. So, but that's my reaction to that.